This is the story of a young girl, a lady, who approaches me asking me to help her get in the right shape and size and that she thought was perfect for her. And when she met me, she was weighing 120 kgs and was excessively overweight. And she had tried everything. She, at least that's what she said. And she had given up hope. In fact, when she met me, she said that I don't think it's going to work, but I just thought I'll give it a last shot. Now, I was very tempted to ask her, what has to happen if for her to work out regularly, for her to do her dieting, and the kind of stuff that everybody does to lose weight. In fact, I was willing to refer her to a dietitian and say, why don't you go and put efforts, and this is the best dietitian in town. She could help you with it. But then, as I started talking to her, I realized that in her examples that she was giving, she had the knowledge of how to lose weight and how to get into shape. But every week or once in 2 weeks, after putting efforts, she would break down with an emotional outbreak. And then for a month or two, she wouldn't go back to her routine and she would put on more weight. So her life went through this pattern where she would, after 2 months, decide, okay, now I have to do something about my weight. And then she would do it for a week or two. She would measure and she knows that she's making progress. But then something happens in her life where she gets into that total emotional outbreak, and then she stops doing what works for her. And then she puts on a lot of weight, and then she tries to get back into the routine again. So when she approached me, she came with this belief and this attitude that nothing works for her. What she failed to recognize at that moment was that things are working for her. What she's unable to do is to be consistent about what works for her. Now, that's a great discovery, but it isn't enough, because knowing this is not going to help her be consistent. So we went deeper and I explored. I found out what are the things going in her life that gets her to feel bad. And apparently this thing had to do with guilt. Now, her father passed away some time ago and she lives with a mother. She has a mother and she's married, and she doesn't live with her mother, but she lives in an independent house. Her mother lives nearby, and even as she was telling me her story, there were tears welling up her eyes, and she felt this deep sense of guilt within her that she's not bringing her mother into her own house and taking care of her. And as she was saying, she was in tears, and it was easy to see how she was getting into an emotional roller coaster. And it's easy to perceive that if this is what she's doing day in and day out, there is no way she's going to be motivated to think about her shape and size, because her time and attention is going on feeling guilty. So we explored further, and I started talking to her about what would happen when she brings her mother home. And in that journey, she discovered that it has happened in the past before, and her mother is not actually very happy being in her house, because in her mother's own house, she feels a sense of freedom, independence, and a lot of space. And when she visits her mother in her mother's house, the mother has a lot more to talk to her, communicate to her, and it keeps her happy. So during the conversation, somewhere she figured out that she's not being selfish by letting her mother stay alone. In fact, that was the best thing for her family and for her mother. And all she had to do was visit her mother frequently. In fact, she agreed to meeting her twice a week at the minimum, and an average do 4 visits in a week. And she said, my mother lives very close by, it's easy to visit, and that keeps my mother happy. And when I'm happy, I continue to do the things that helps me to reduce weight. And this was the change that was required for her to actually be emotionally free enough to lose weight. Now, it might surprise you as in, okay, if it is so simple, she has to just visit her mother twice a week. How is it that she didn't know this? How is it that she didn't arrive at this answer? How is it that nobody else found out that this is the solution? Well, it's very simple. The first thing, how is it that nobody else found out this is the solution? Because nobody was searching for what is going on in her life with her mother. They were all busy trying to give her advice on what nutrition to eat, what coach to go to, which gym is the best. And that way, nobody is going to see what the real problem is. Now, she knew where the real problem was. She knew that her emotions were coming in the way. But then, when we are in a deep emotional state, our brains don't think clearly. This is why somebody commits a murder, because they're angry. And after committing a murder, they think, that is not me. What have I done? So when our emotions go out of control, solutions that are simple, that are obvious in front of us, people don't see. They miss it out. Now, what happened with this particular girl was, whenever she thought about her mother, even before she can think of a solution, a deep guilt would fill her heart. And when guilt feels, she feels terrible, she feels depressed, she feels sorrowful. And then her body is weighing down with sad feelings. And that way, it's impossible for her to think clearly, to think out of the box. So what did I do? I took her through the same journey again. But when I was talking to her, I made sure she wasn't feeling guilty, she was laughing all the way. Now, when a person is laughing, the body produces a completely different set of neurochemicals. So I'm having the same conversation with her, but she's laughing, and in her mind she's looking at the problems, and then she says, hey, it's simple, I have to just visit my mother 2 times a week and I can do it. The same girl for many years who couldn't solve that problem came up with a solution when we changed the emotions that were attached with it. Now obviously the limitation in this particular solution is that I had to be involved in making her laugh and think about the problem. And we found a solution to one problem. But what has to happen for her to do this by herself? So this is what I helped her with next. We did excellence installation where we made sure that whenever she thinks about her mother, she feels good. She remembers the happy moments instead of feeling guilty. And to me, this is not only about weight loss or getting into shape. This is generative. Because now, instead of basing a relationship on guilt, she's going to base a relationship on happiness and joy. A simple technique that I use to help people disconnect from their emotions. And it's very important because disconnecting from emotions is important, because if you think about a situation and you feel afraid or you feel stuck or you feel limited, before you get into confidence, before you get into free emotions, you need to first disconnect from the unresourceful, the limiting emotions. So I use a very simple technique for helping people disconnect from their emotions conversationally. And this technique is called disassociation. So when you think about things that happen in your life, there are 2 ways you can remember them. One is you can remember it as if you're there again. You see every detail as it happened. And what happens is you feel what you felt back then. You have the same emotions as and when those situations happened. The other way to remember and think about things that are happening in your life is where you are seeing yourself in those situations as if you're a camera, as if you're a third person watching you. Now, what this does is when you see yourself in those situations, it completely disconnects your emotions from the situation. It completely disconnects the way you feel about it from those situations. In fact, it's a very powerful technique. They use this for doing surgery. When hypnotists help people to do pain control, like an open heart surgery, the technique they use is they get you to see yourself lying on that situation. And when a person sees themselves, it completely disconnects the feelings from what they are seeing. So, in fact, there is a medical drug called the dissociative drug. It's ketamine. And during surgeries, people are injected with ketamine. And what happens is it creates a form of hallucination where the person is floating up from the body and watching himself lying there. And the doctors perform the surgery and he doesn't feel a pain. And so disassociation is a creative process as well. Most music directors, film producers, people I have worked with, when they are producing art, they have an ability to step outside their body and go back and see themselves in that production along with the audience. And what it does is it takes the emotional connect they have to their creation and allows them to emotionally connect with that creation as an audience, as someone else. Now, the business people, they use this association to create solutions, to think out of the box. What I did with this girl was a very similar process. In my conversation, linguistically, using language, I helped her to see what is going on in her life, but instead of being there, she saw it as a third person. Now let me give you an example. Let's say Susie is a girl who has a manager, and when he talks to her in a particular way, she freezes and she goes blank. And let's say Susie approaches me and Susie says, Antano, I have this situation, and she thinks about what happens and she looks up and she remembers the boss and that situation. Now, when she's going into that situation, she's going in associated. She's not seeing herself. She's in that situation again, and her body freezes. And then she's describing the problem. But when she's describing the problem, she's having limiting emotions in her body. So then I talk to her a bit, and then I ask a question that changes her perception. I say, okay, so I want to understand this further. And I want to know, when you see Susie in the office, she's sitting there in the desk, and you notice that she's typing on the computer, and you see that she's looking at the computer, and then the boss is arriving there. Now, when I narrate Susie's experience that way, what Susie is doing is she's seeing a picture of her sitting there in the desk. In that moment, she's disassociated. She's become a third person, which means she's not feeling what she felt when the situation arrived. And then I lead her on. I say, okay, so the boss comes in and throws that report and yells at Susie. Now, what are Susie's choices? What can she do? Now, if you hear the language over here, I'm not saying the boss comes and yells at you. Because if I say you, it would associate her back into that situation. But by using her name, I'm saying, so you see Susie there, she's sitting, and the boss comes and yells at Susie. Now, that kind of a language is called disassociative language. Now, not only am I asking Susie a question, not only am I saying, so what are Susie's choices? But by way of asking that question, I'm also directing her mind to disassociate, to see herself in that situations. So what happens is when she's thinking about an answer to that question, she's actually seeing herself there, which means she doesn't feel what she felt back then, which means now she's emotionally disconnected, which means now she can be her own coach, her own consultant. She can think out of the box and solve her own situations. This is very similar to what I did with this lady who came to me for help losing weight. I first helped her disassociate, then I made a lot of jokes, so she's laughing, and she's seeing herself in the same situations. And by changing how she feels inside, her biochemistry, when she's thinking about the situation, she comes up with her own solution. And obviously, after that, she has been consistently been able to enjoy the effort she's putting into losing weight, and it has significantly helped her getting back in shape. So you probably are thinking, how is this going to help me? And well, two things. One, when you're solving a problem, use the help of someone who can help you feel good, so that when you're thinking about the problem, you are not becoming the problem. And second, it may also help to do things that helps you to come out of that limiting emotion before you solve problems. Otherwise, you're putting yourself in a catch-22 situation. The problem makes you feel stuck, and the way you feel will stop you from finding obvious, simple solutions that could be in front of you. So I'll see you soon in the next video. Thank you.